All right, welcome to our help session for the 30th of December, 2015. I'd like to thank everyone that's able to attend or watch later, either way. Just to address some, I guess, housekeeping items, we did have some, I think, a little bit of a misunderstanding. I just wanted to clear some things up here about what the help sessions are for, um, kind of their purpose, and how I sort of envision seeing them work. There are a couple of things. First of all, I realize not everyone can attend at the times that I have them scheduled. And what I do is one week I will schedule them at 5 a.m. my time, which is that's this week. That's why I look like this. The next time I will do it at noon my time, and the next time I'll do it at around 8 p.m. my time. We maybe vary that one a little bit more. Um, I realize that's not going to work for everyone around the world, and we have an international audience. But these sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch them over at Google Plus at the Curtis Judd audio page. And really, it's cool if you can attend live, but if you can't attend live, don't sweat it. You can still ask questions or still submit comments. And all you have to do is go over to the Google Plus page. So if you don't know how to find that, just go to Google Plus, do a search for Curtis Judd Audio. And at my Curtis Judd Audio page, you'll see the listings for all the help sessions. And you just look for the current one or the one that's upcoming, submit a comment there, and you will be able to um, then I'll be happy to address that in the next session, whether you can attend or not. And then if you cannot attend, which again, totally fine if you can't, then you can always go back and watch it later. And so that's really how I see it working. First of all, these were also set up as part of the production audio course. So if you're enrolled in the course, I'll also send you an email and you can attend live. That is, you can actually get online and ask questions live if it works for your particular time zone. If not, again, submit your questions. And if you're enrolled in the class as well, feel free to email me at any time with any questions you have. So uh, I don't want this to become a frustration for you because you can't attend at the times that they're scheduled. That's totally perfect. I mean, there's no issue with that. I don't think you have to feel like you have to be here. Cool if you can attend live, but if not, totally fine as well. So just wanted to get that out of the way. That is sort of a little bit of a background on just sort of how I see doing these. And again, you don't have to be here live. All right, let's talk about a few things here. Let me first of all check to see if there are any questions that were submitted ahead of time. Let's see. I do not see. Well, I see one comment. Shane Clements left a note over on this session at Google Plus saying, this might help participants across the globe to know the local time, and he left a link there, and that's great. Thank you, Shane, for that. That's great. You can use that link. However, also Google Plus does the time zone conversion for you. So I believe, I don't know if it's tied to where you're browsing from, or if it's tied to your Google profile, but it should do the time zone conversion for you and show you the time for the session in your local time zone. So just go to the Google Plus page, and as soon as you look at the session that you're interested in, it should show the time that it will be broadcast live. So there's that as well. Don't have any other questions over there, so let's first of all talk about noise. I wanted to cover that topic today. That's one that comes up quite a bit, and in some of the reviews that I do, especially of microphones and of audio recorders, the subject of noise comes up. And I think we need to address that subject a little bit because it's sometimes, I'm not sure everyone understands exactly what it means. And I think it's important to understand that. So let me just share some things here with you. I'm sharing my screen. First of all, let's go to the web browser. Okay. So here, let's just go here. Okay, you see this little graphic I put up here on the Curtis Judd Audio webpage or Google Plus page, and you'll know that you're at the right one if you see this. I do have another Google Plus page. This is the one that's relevant to the help sessions and to the course. So in any case, this represents what I would call a signal chain. And uh, I'm giving these as background information because it's important to the the concept of noise. But here, of course, what we have is what's not represented here really is the sound source. So that's usually going to be voice of somebody, your actor or talent. Then we have a microphone. The microphone sends a signal to a preamplifier. The preamplifier sends it to some sort of recorder with an analog to digital converter, and then that's saved to a file in the form of ones and zeros and stored on some sort of memory or drive or something. And so that's really the whole signal chain here. And a signal chain is important to the concept or to the discussion about noise because noise can be introduced at any point in the signal chain. If you have a person in a room and there's noise in the room, that can be included. Microphones make their own electrical self noise, same with preamplifiers. And then the analog to digital converter has to, based on the way it works, may or may not also introduce some noise. And then once it gets to the digital state, you're done. You're not adding any more noise after that, even if you have bad media or bad storage media, because at that point it's digital and then it's just errors or no errors. So anyway, so that's how noise gets introduced into a recording signal. And when I do noise performance tests, I don't have anything that can only measure just the microphone, preamplifier, and analog to digital converter noise. So what I'm really measuring is what I would call practical noise floor. And that includes any noise that may be in the room where the talent is recording, any noise generated by the microphone, any generated by the preamplifier, and then whatever the analog to digital converter does with all that noise. That's what's included. And the way I measure it, here we have an audio clip in Adobe Audition, and I have a section here where there's no dialogue. And if I just highlight that, and what I typically try to do is avoid any obvious things, like this is probably a breath here. Here is probably just some sort of ambient noise. I'm not as interested in those kind of things. I'm more interested in, okay, what's kind of the practical noise when the talent's being as quiet as they possibly can and there's not a lot of clatter and other obvious noises, but just sort of the regular room tone. And so I just highlight that. Then I come over here to my amplitude statistics and I scan the selection. All right. I'll come back to these here, but here's a histogram that shows the audio energy in this selected section of audio. And you can see here, just like a histogram you'd use on a camera, it shows you where the bulk of it is. And here you can see, I would say the bulk of it is probably sitting somewhere around minus almost 61.5, maybe almost 62. And that's pretty good. Typically what I'm aiming for at a practical level is when I've finished mastering the audio and mixing it, I really like the noise floor or the silence sections to sit around minus 60 or lower. And in this particular case, we're sitting at about almost minus 61.5. So that's totally acceptable. There will be some noise that's going to creep up a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more present. But that's typically where I like to do it. And I think in most cases, that's going to be acceptable for the types of pieces I'm working on. The reason I bring this up is that some people get very concerned about, anything that comes up in a review or comes up on a specification page relating to noise. And I just want to make it really clear well, I think that first of all, that becomes a temptation for all of us when we're looking at microphones and potential microphones to buy or to use. What's its noise performance like? And that's one factor of a microphone. There are so many other factors as well, just in terms of deciding on what the right mic is. So I just wanted to kind of help put the noise in perspective, and just keep in mind it's only one specification. It's only one factor to consider. You can do noise reduction in post. I prefer not to if I don't have to, and in this case, I didn't do any, and yet the mic is still providing good noise performance, and the preamplifier and the room where I was recording. So I'm perfectly happy with this, and I'm not going to do any additional noise reduction on this. Could I? Yeah, you certainly could. And if you go kind of light-handed on it, I think you could clean this up even more and probably move it. You could probably move this needle quite a bit. You could probably go down to minus 65 without affecting the main body of dialogue audio. So, if you're gonna get really hardcore about it, you can do that. But again, I don't typically like to do that if I can avoid it. I think noise reduction, if you got to do it, you got to do it, but to keep it from getting distracting. But it can also get distracting if you go too heavy on it and it starts making the audio itself sound a little bit more robotic. Um, and it's best to avoid it if you can. But if you've got to use it, you use it. So that's kind of my philosophy on approaching noise and how to keep that in perspective. Now, I think the reason it becomes a temptation for so many of us is that it's a specification that you can assign a number to. There are so many there's so many things about microphones and preamplifiers that you can't assign numbers to. You cannot assign them, and that's going to just be subjective things like how does the preamplifier sound, or how does a microphone sound? What does it do to people's voices? And yeah, you could get a frequency response chart, and that can kind of give you an idea somewhat. But it's not until you start recording a particular voice in a particular room with a particular microphone and a particular preamplifier that you really start to understand exactly how that sounds and how they work together and whether it's the right choice or not. So um, this makes it harder in some ways, and it makes it easier in some ways. It makes it easier from the standpoint of don't lose sleep over the noise performance of your signal chain or your microphone or your preamplifier. Um, but it's just something to understand and to keep at the back of your mind, and to help you address those types of situations when you run into situations where noise is becoming a problem for you. All right. Let's come back to the amplitude statistics. This is an interesting panel that I use quite a lot when I'm post-processing audio. And let me just run through each of the items that they have listed here. I don't think we're going to go into a lot of detail, but I do want to look at some of them and just describe what I use them for and why I think they're important. And first of all, let me scan the entire piece of audio here just to get a more realistic reading on these. Okay, first of all, we have peak amplitude and true peak amplitude. And what these are measuring is the hottest peak in the entire clip of audio that you've just measured. So in this case, if I do this again, if I scan this, you see these little white arrows? This will actually point out where in the audio it measured that. So if I click here, you can see that the playhead jumps right to this peak right here, and I can zoom in. It was, if I tap it again, it's this peak right here. Isn't that interesting? That peak right there is the hottest one in this audio clip. Boom, right about somewhere in there. And it's measuring it at minus 1.52 dB true peak. You can see that the peak amplitude differs from the true peak amplitude. Usually the true peak's higher than the peak, but for whatever reason, it's showing the true peak at minus 1.52. Again, I'm typically aiming to get this at minus 1.5 or lower. And you can see we've already achieved that. This piece of audio is actually already mastered. I already did the mixing on it and got it to where I wanted it. But if you ever need to figure out, if you're having a trouble getting that peak down to where you want it, and you can't see in the audio where it is problematic, you can just tap on this right here, come in, and if you wanted to, you could actually just highlight that waveform. And actually, if I just wanted to get that one cycle, I could just come here, and I can actually just pull the amplitude down on that one peak if that's giving me trouble. Come back out. Now if I run the statistics on this piece of audio, it's still at 1.52, but it's going to be a different peak that sits there. Yeah, so now it's this one here. So that's just an idea of what I use those for. Of course, the idea here is with true peak amplitude, you want to be at minus 1.5-ish. The reason you want to be there is that so once you export your video and do the final rendering, and it takes the audio and it compresses it, not from an audio standpoint, but from a digital standpoint. That is to say, it makes the file smaller by throwing out some information. You want to be at minus 1.5 because in that process of compressing it digitally, those peaks may actually change because it's doing some additional processing there. So that's why I usually aim for a true peak of minus 1.52. What that means is if you're at minus 1.5 and then it goes through the digital compression on the export, what the peaks can move, but they almost never will actually clip at 0 dB. So that's why I usually aim for that, because then that way I have clean audio that makes it past any sort of quality control. And if you're submitting for broadcast, it's important to make sure that you meet all of the quality control standards. So that's why I aim for that. Let's just take a check in here and make sure I haven't missed any questions or anything. We're going to switch to my Q&A panel here. No questions submitted. Okay. Very good. We'll stick with this. Oh, whoops, I stopped sharing. Let's start sharing again. Okay. All right, back to Audition. Now, so that's peak and true peak. Again, I typically rely on the true peak amplitude, not too concerned about peak amplitude. I don't usually use these maximum and minimum sample values. So that's not too important. They also have this possibly clipped samples. I don't usually rely on that too much simply because I can use the true peak amplitude. However, if you're trying to figure out if you've managed one peak that was giving you trouble and you're still having, then you remeasure using the amplitude statistics again, you rescan it. This will tell you how many more transients or peaks you have left that are possibly clipping. So that can be helpful as well. Then we have the RMS amplitude measurements. And these are super helpful, again, when I'm measuring noise floor like I showed you before. If I come into this section here, whoops, this is again, I use air quotes here when I say this is a section of silence in between dialogue. I could just highlight this here and measure that to get a reading on how my noise floor is doing. I almost always come to the average RMS amplitude simply because that sort of takes care of any anomalies. Like if there's one peak in here, and in fact, I'm sure there is, if I come to the histogram, there's some down at minus 56 almost, some energy in there that's at minus 56 dBs. But you know what? I'm not really concerned about that. I'm concerned about where the bulk of it is. And here, the bulk of it is below minus 60. So RMS stands for root mean square. And that's just sort of a way of averaging. In fact, you can see there's some settings. You can measure it in different ways. And I don't understand entirely these differences. And I generally just use the default settings. So I just leave them there. But again, it's an average of sorts. And it gives you a reading, a kind of an average reading of all the samples in that section to give you a sense of where your audio is sitting. So typically I'll use, again, this average RMS amplitude. DC offset, I don't use that a whole lot because in the digital recording world, that DC offset is not something that happens a lot unless you have bad gear. That is to say, defective, something's wrong with it. So I don't usually use it, but every once in a while, if it shows a little value, you can repair that in Audition. You can repair DC offset right here. The way you'll be able to see whether or not you have DC offset is that during the silent sections, it won't return to this middle minus infinity line. It'll all be sitting either above or below that. That's what DC offset is. So again, not something that's real common in the digital recording world, but something that you can, if you do run into that, the DC offsets measurement here is helpful for you. Measured bit depth is 24. Dynamic range, this can be interesting here. So if I measure my mastered audio here, it's saying I have a dynamic range of 70 dB, and I used 68.3 dB of dynamic range with the actual audio. So that's somewhat interesting. That's a practical measurement. Let's see if I can get a file that has not been mastered. I bet you this one hasn't been. This also something, if you weren't aware, probably most of you were, but if you were not aware, this is a video file. And in it, I have the audio that was recorded with the video file. That's what this is here. you can actually just open a video file and it will show you the audio attached with it, which is really helpful, just in case you didn't know that. Let's measure the dynamic range on this. This is also sitting at about 70 dB of dynamic range. Didn't change a whole lot. And we actually use 68 dB of dynamic range. So again, dynamic range, just like on cameras, dynamic range refers to the difference between the quietest parts and the loudest parts. So that can be a helpful measure at some point too. Loudness and perceived loudness. I'm not really sure what these are in this case, to be entirely 100% honest, and I never use them. However, I do use this loudness measurement here. This is the loudness as measured by this standard. It's or measurement method, which is the ITU RBS 1770-3 loudness. This is what we use to do our loudness normalizing, and you can see right now this entire audio clip currently sits at -22 LUFS. If we were going to European broadcast, we'd be aiming for -23, so we're almost there. For US, you'd aim for -24. And then for online distribution, we would be aiming for, since this is a mono audio file, we'd be aiming for -19. Or if it was stereo, we'd be aiming for -16. Those are perceptually equivalent. So -19 for mono, -16 for stereo. So if we were going to web, we'd probably need to do some compression here so we could manage some of these peaks, bring them down, and then normalize the entire audio clip to make it loud enough for web distribution. So that's how I typically use this Amplitude Statistics panel here. And it can be pretty helpful in a lot of ways. So I spend quite a bit of time there. It's usually the last step I'll use after I do all of my other audio processing. So just to sort of put it in context for you so you understand where I'm coming from on that. All right, let's check back in with our audience here just to see where we're at. We'll turn off the screen sharing and let's go back to the Google Plus site just to see if anyone has submitted any questions as yet. All right, no new questions yet. Okay, fair enough. We are tracking. We've got a couple more minutes here. What I'll do for the last few minutes here is just talk about a couple of things I've been working on. Here's a gee whiz thing. The most recently purchased microphone, if you want to sort of nerd out on gear for a minute here, for me is the, actually, let's go here. Yeah, we've got that. Okay. This is an interesting microphone choice, you'll see. Here's a classic, the Shure SM57. LC just means less cable, that come with a cable. This microphone right here, this is actually a kind of a classic, well, you can see they call it a professional workhorse mic. Indeed it is. I actually bought this to mic musician in a live concert. That was one of the more recent jobs that I did. And this is a mic that I've actually wanted for a long, long time, but just didn't have one. It's very similar to the SM58, which you've all, whoops, probably seen before. Let's get the right number typed in there. Here's the classic vocal microphone for live, not only live singers, but also, you know, any sort of MC or someone that's hosting a show. But anyway, the SM57 is technically the exact same microphone capsule. It's a dynamic microphone, so it does not need phantom power. It's not a condenser microphone, so it's not something you use a lot in film and video. But I think there are even some cases in film and video where you might want to use it. It could be a good choice for interviews like on trade show floors, things of that nature. And I have seen them used there. but it's a definitely a workhorse type of microphone. You could use it for voiceover as well, but if you just wanted to, that's just sort of a gee whiz thing. But you can see this microphone has been in production since I believe the late 60s. You can see it gets 5-star reviews here. It's a great microphone. Same with the SM58, which I also have one of those. You can see they run about $100. So if you're looking for like a really inexpensive voiceover microphone, you're working in your home to do the voiceover work, you don't have a lot of acoustic treatment, the SM58 or the SM57 would both be a good choice. Now, the main difference between these two microphones is this thing that they put on the front here, the cover over the capsule. Um, the other one is supposed to be tuned more for dialogue, but this one is actually also used for dialogue a lot as well. In fact, in the United States here, the president of the United States, the podium where he gives most of his talks from the White House actually has two of these. Yes, Shure SM57 on it. And it works, again, great for dialogue. I think the reason they chose the 57 over the 58 in that case, if I had to guess, I don't know for sure, but my guess is that these are lower profile, they're smaller. And less imposing, and that's what they wanted. They wanted something less imposing. And then on top of this, I believe they put a sort of a foam wind cover on top of it. So another thing that's really nice about these mics, if you are using them in live sound reinforcement, that is, you're amplifying someone for a live show of some sort, they don't tend to feed back a lot. Even if you have speakers behind the microphone, these don't have a tendency to feed back very much at all. And the talent has to be up really close on them. That's why they're not used a lot in film when you're on screen, and just mostly for voiceover. But when they're on screen, it's impractical because you have to get them so close to the mouth of the performer or the talent that it generally isn't used in film. So there's just sort of a gee whiz thing. I don't know if you guys are interested in that or not, but there's just some information there. All right. Again, I wanted to thank those that have been involved in the sessions, those that have questions. Go ahead and, again, in the future, don't sweat it so much if you can't attend live. It's okay. I'm all right with that. I realize that, our schedules may not line up, and that's perfectly fine. I do these sessions live just because it's a convenient way to kind of capture everything and make it available to the wider audience. And for those that do want to attend live, that's cool. And we've had people attend live in the past. So again, just submit your questions ahead of time if you can't make it. And I realize that's totally fine. So thanks everyone for checking in. Let's see, we have a couple more minutes. What else can we talk about here really quickly? I can talk about what's coming on my YouTube channel here in the next little bit. I have two things that I'm working on. Number one is a new lavalier microphone that I am evaluating. It works for mobile devices, so it's really made for mobile phones. So that means it has a 3.5 millimeter TRRS input, and it is only $20, so it's definitely on the cheap end of things. It is called the Gora lavalier. In fact, I can pull that up here. We can share it with you just so you can see. And I've been pretty happy with it. It's been working quite nicely. So if I go to Amazon, do Gora, Gora lavalier. There it is. Yeah, so look for that review coming in the next couple days here. I'm hoping to finish that up, at least do the production today, and then we'll have the editing and the rest of the stuff out to you here pretty quick. It will work with iPhones. It works with Android phones, as long as the Android phone has a 3.5 millimeter TRRS input, which is about 99.9% of Android phones at this point in history. So it's going to work with most of those. It will work with most tablets as well. So there you go. It just comes, it's very simple. It comes with the, of course, the microphone itself, foam wind cover, clip, little carrying pouch, and it actually works really pretty nicely. I'm pretty happy with it. So if you've got a tight budget, there can be, and you've got a phone you can record to, that can be a pretty nice option. One of the questions I get a lot as well is, I see I can record audio, but can I also record my video with my phone at the same time? And the answer is yes, of course, you can do that. I've had a couple people with Android phones come back to me, and I just don't know enough about their particular setup They said essentially, "Hey, I can't get the audio to record with the video. It's only recording the camera's mic or the phone's microphone, not the external microphone." And I assume that's a setting somewhere in their camera app, but I just don't have an Android phone on hand to test that, or certainly not the exact model they have. So anyway, I think it's going to work with most Android phones and most, and it certainly works with all of the Apple devices. So the other thing that I have coming up is the Aperture has a new external monitor, and here it is right here. It's called the VS2 Fine HD. It is a monitor, but it also comes with everything you need to get it working, which is one of the other tricks of a lot of other video monitors. It's a 7-inch monitor, so it's much bigger than what you have on your camera. In most cases, it's full HD, so you're actually getting the full readout of the camera. It has some really nice features for setting exposure and focus. So it has uh, focus peaking, so you can see the white sections here, which confirm that you're in focus, which is a super handy feature. Again, I realize this is not audio related, but we're past time, so I figure it's okay to talk about this. It also has zebra stripes. It has a histogram, which they show here. It also has false color, which is one of my favorite exposure tools. And you can see down here, there's a sort of a meter here that shows you where each of those values are showing. Obviously, in this sunset image here, you can see this is the hottest part. When it's red, that shows that it's clipping. It's greater than 100 IRE. So you can know that part's clipping. And then down here in the shadows in the water, you're going to see the blues here, and in this shadow here, that all of this is going to be in shadow. So you can tell what's going to be silhouetted and what's going to be clipping, or what shadows might be crushed. So false color is really pretty handy that way. It does not have a typical or standard waveform monitor as yet. But again, I find a waveform can be really helpful in production, but I think false color for me, once you get used to that, that's a super quick, super easy way to make sure your exposure is where you want it. So um, definitely a nice little piece of kit here. This one runs about $300 US. And I just got it last night, so I just started working with it a little bit. So far, the screen looks beautiful, though. The image that comes off of it is really nice. So that'll be coming up in a review here pretty quick as well. All right. That brings us to the end of our session for today. Want to thank all those that attended or will be viewing here in the future the recorded session. If you have any questions and you're enrolled in the class, email me at any time. If you have any other questions and you're not enrolled in the class, go ahead and send me a message over on the Google Plus page. You're welcome to do that, or over on my YouTube channel, you're welcome to do that as well. I'm always happy to try my best and answer those questions as well. Everyone take care. Have a happy holiday and happy recording. Talk to you later.